is and the overall track and how close it could get to us.
Yeah, so let's talk about it. Not only into Chatham, but the rest of the Cape. And I just posted on my Instagram, Jen was saying yesterday on air, and it's true, describing to someone where you live on the Cape, you go like this, you make a flex, and then you tell people where you live on the Cape. That's how they do it. Just like in Michigan, they use the hand. You say, oh, I live here. This is Detroit. You know, that's how you do it. So that's one that you could definitely do if you're trying to describe where you are on the Cape here, because it does look like someone is flexing their muscle. And Hurricane Lee still flexing its muscles with winds at 85 miles an hour, racing off to the north at 16. There's your center of circulation, but that windshield's really off to the north already into places like Connecticut and into Maine, where we do have advisories posted now. Over 3 million people in watches and warnings, and those have extended into Canada as well. Our surge could get up to 3 feet. We're talking from Long Island to down East Maine. Down East Maine, you hear that a lot. It's really this section of Maine right up here. That's where it's considered down East Maine. Bermuda, we still had some gusty winds this morning under tropical storm warning, but the storm is passing off to its north. Conditions will improve for us and go downhill for us here into the northeast, as Jordan was mentioning. This is a wide-reaching storm. This thing has a massive wingspan, over 300 miles out from the center. You're feeling tropical storm force winds, hurricane force winds out 100 miles from the center, and it's just going to keep expanding like this as we head through time. That north wind is already giving us some water rises here into the Carolinas. Hatteras gusting to 28, Virginia gusting to 22. This thing's hundreds of miles away from us there. So imagine once it gets closer, even though this is probably going to turn into something extratropical eventually, will it make landfall as a hurricane, a tropical storm, an extratropical system? It doesn't matter. We are still going to have the effects from it no matter what it is technically called. Wave heights 10 to 15 feet from South Carolina to the Jersey Shore for us. Everyone stay out of the water. Not only today, but as we head into tomorrow, the waves take a minute sometimes to die down, so keep that in mind. We're talking 40-footers right here into the center of the storm. And as we look at the buoys, they've been pretty consistent for the last 12 hours. So this is what I was mentioning, that you might think, oh, the storm's already gone by, but sometimes it takes a second for those waves to really disseminate. So here's a look at the tropical storm force winds. This is where we have our winds 39 miles an hour more. Where you have the red, our winds are 58 miles an hour and more. Hurricane force wind is 74 miles an hour or greater, just to let you know. So these are all tropical storm force winds. We'll get them at the Cape there and then into Maine. And then, of course, it's going to blow on out of here by Sunday. We'll get the sunshine back into places like Portland and also into Boston. Let's have a look at the winds real quick and where they will be. Of course, the core is where we have the strongest winds, but still, I mean, wide-reaching effects from this, up to 70, 75 mile an hour winds for us. But look how fast this thing accelerates as we head into the weekend. And just real quick, I want to show you, there it is for you on Saturday into the afternoon, 75 mile an hour winds potentially, and then we get a lot better, Kelly. Look at that on Sunday. We drop back down into the 20, 30 mile an hour range.
We salvage the second half
of the road that they have to actually clear out. But it looks like the worst weather will be up here from really Long Island through Maine. This is where we could see our highest water rises. But as Kelly mentioned, that overwash already happening, or that flooding with the water coming up. Duck, we're now at 1.7 feet. Hatteras, 1.5. That north flow is just bringing water southbound over the Outer Banks, so that's why there are coastal flood warnings. And that essentially means you'll have a temporary inundation of seawater over normally dry land. It can be caused from tides, onshore winds, surge, all the above. And we see these frequencies increasing because of the changing climate. We've seen it in South Florida too. Coastal advisories here into the northeast for some of that flooding and that overwash. And it doesn't help that tides are highest during new and full moons, and we have a new moon beginning tonight. So that's probably going to exacerbate the situation. We go through a couple high tide cycles here in Montauk. One this evening, which isn't great because that storm's still coming up, could give us that push of water. And then on Saturday, that wind direction is going to change. So maybe you get it from Long Island Sound onto places like Long Island with more of a westerly, northwesterly component. As we head into our Saturday, early morning, notice that we have high tide at 1:38 here in Nantucket, and you get that north wind. So that's not great that it's going to continue to blow even Saturday afternoon. High tide with the winds going to be impacting us. We could see minor, river flooding with this as well. Here's a look at the winds coming in. Things go downhill tonight. They are at its worst on Saturday, but this thing just gets out of here, boogies out of here. On our Sunday, the sun will be back and the winds will die down from south to north. Lynette.
All right, Steph. It's
Peak hurricane season is here and activity is bubbling in the Atlantic right now. Of course, here in America's Morning headquarters, all eyes are on Hurricane Lee. Hurricane watches are up for parts of Maine and tropical storm warnings line the New England coast. Invest 97L right here. You should keep an eye on that because this could be Nigel in the coming days. And then we have another area to watch coming off the Atlantic. Margot, by the way, is not one that we have to worry about here in the U.S. But let's focus in on Lee. Lynette has the latest with it.
All right, Steph.
Yes, rough summer, very wet summer. Lee's impact in Maine will not just be along the coast. Rain and winds will be felt inland. The ground is already saturated, putting trees at risk of falling.
And that's a real concern, especially for the state's apple farmers. There are more than 80 apple farms in the state of Maine. They produce about 1 million bushels of apples every year. Joining us live this morning is Harry Ricker, owner of Ricker Hill Orchards in Turner, Maine. I see you're right in the middle of an orchard right now. Thank you for joining us. Have you been having to do anything different preparing for Lee?
We've been growing apples for a couple hundred years.
For the best for you, Harry Ricker, owner of Ricker Hill Orchard in Maine. Thank you so much for joining us, and I'm really hoping for the best for him.
I hope so, too. They've got apple cider donuts, by the way, and a disc golf course right on the orchard. So
sign me up.
All right, remember to stay tuned to the Weather Channel on your smart TV, where you can see the latest coverage of hurricane.
We had an 8 a.m. advisory come out showing us that Lee was a Cat 1, 85 miles an hour, moving north at 16, very fast accelerating. And I will say this, our next advisory is at 11, and we will see if there will be any changes to this hurricane. It's got a massive field of wind and cloud already impacting us, and it has been huge for a while. It's been a big storm. Wednesday, our tropical storm force winds were out 240 miles. Now, look at that, nearly 350 miles. That's how far out from the center our tropical storm force winds are. Now, this could turn into a post-tropical cyclone. It might turn into an extratropical system at a time. Now, is it going to landfall as a tropical storm, a hurricane, or an extratropical system? It won't matter the name. We are still going to feel all the effects from it, no matter what they call this. Now, for it to be post-tropical, no longer has sufficient tropical characteristics. The winds typically below hurricane strength in a much broader field. We see it already doing that, starting to do that transition. Heavy rain and high winds can also continue with this. Advisories have expanded. They go into Canada. Over 3 million are under watches and warnings. We do have that threat for surge up to 3 feet, really along a big chunk of the coast. And you see this will race through. Basically, things will go downhill tonight. Tomorrow is when we have the worst weather. And then on Sunday, the sunshine is back from Portland to Boston. So go out there and pick those apples. Our buoy showing our winds gusting 30, 40, 45 miles an hour. Hamilton there in Bermuda still gusting in the 40-mile-an-hour range with that onshore flow bringing us that water rise into the Outer Banks. But notice Nantucket already gusting to 38. This thing's like 400 miles from us. So we're already feeling the effects, and just shows you how broad it is. The wave height's 40 feet out in the core, but it is propagating everything out. 10, 15-foot wave heights for us here along the East Coast. And notice those big wave heights right in the center. So as this nears the shore here, it's going to be big time into places like Canada and Maine. And because it's so large, it's giving us waves from Florida all the way to the northeast, and we have rip currents there. The winds, they really start to pick up tonight. We're talking about 60, 70-mile-an-hour winds potentially on all of our coastal areas. Again, Saturday's the day. Sunday, literally, we're going to be back in the sun in the 70s, Lynette. Pretty wild.
It is pretty wild.